Sometimes when we begin to question our faith or have doubts about our tradition, it can feel like we are wandering out into the desert. When we take a step back and honestly evaluate organized religion in the 21st century, many times it doesn't make any sense. The more we cling to it and try to save it, the worse it becomes. In addition, widespread abuse, cover-ups, and victim shaming cause some of us to question whether it will ever be right again.
The Desert Sanctuary was created by Carl and Laura Forehand. It consists of a podcast, a blog, along with Carl and Laura's writing.
We're happy you're here. Welcome to the show. Hi, welcome to the Desert Sanctuary. I'm Laura Forehand. I'm here with Carl Forehand, and it is the last day of 2022, if you can believe it.
And your birthday.
Yeah, well, I wasn't going to mention that, but anyway, it is the last day. So this is a great way to go out of this year and start a new year, is to record a podcast. So anyway, we have a wonderful guest that we just met, but before we get started, it's been a while since we recorded, so
yeah, that's
anything
right.
You want to update us on?
So Karen's going to be the first podcast of the year.
Sweet.
This is her first podcast.
Yeah.
Et cetera, et cetera.
So lots
right?
of firsts.
Yeah.
All right. So what do you have to share with us? Any updates?
Well, the book is still doing good. It's still in the top 100 in its category, but it's not up there in the top 10 like it used to be, which is okay. They go through seasons and so on. And I'm really obsessed with it, but and it just provides me frustration to be obsessed with it, something to do, I guess, or whatever. But
and I'm just like, we're in the top 100. That's great.
Yeah.
Or I don't know what number you said we were at, but
we have been working on a couple more books together.
You've been working on one by yourself, and we've been working on one joint. Yeah.
And now I have a pseudo deadline to get the new novel finished.
Good.
By February 1st. And then we're also working on something together, which I'm excited about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's coming together.
We were struggling quite a bit for a little while.
You say we, but you mean me. So I am a struggling writer only because it forces me to really think about what I believe and how I feel about things. So that's always a little bit, I guess, triggering at the end, healing. So whatever, we're getting through it.
So we'll post stats pretty quick on the top podcasts for December. And this is drawing to a close, the interviews with females that we've been doing. In January, we're going to talk to mental health people and so on. But and in February, we're going to do some woo-woo stuff.
I love it. I can't wait.
That's going to be fun.
Yeah.
But this kind of is our first podcast of 2023, but it's our last or next to last in the series. We've been talking for 3 months to females that are in deconstruction or have something to do with that. And it's been great.
Yeah.
We've been doing almost 2 a week, which is it's a ramped up pace, but it was so good to get all of those voices and to hear all the different sides of deconstruction from a female perspective.
Yeah, for sure.
It's good.
Yeah.
So I'm good. I'm content at the end of the year that we've accomplished a lot, recovered from a stroke.
Well,
recovering from a stroke, released 2 books during that year. So at the end of 2022,
2 or 3 parenting deconstructed also. I mean, we didn't release that one, I guess, but
we were involved in it. We were one of the writers.
Yeah.
Jason Elam's heading that up, but at the end of 2022, this is not the way I would have thought the year would have started or ended up, but leaving 2022 pretty content, right?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
I would say so.
So, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're going to talk about Karen's story. Can you introduce her?
Yeah, so I'll give the bio and then we're going to jump right into this conversation. So Karen Schock's love for writing began when she was She got her first diary as a young girl. The lock and key on it made it easy for her to tell the diary some honest, dramatic truths about herself. Even though Karen is now a 53-year-old grandma, which I love, she still loves to put pen to paper and write out her deepest longings, wildest dreams, and biggest fears. The only difference now is there is no longer a lock and key on her thoughts. It's just more like an open book. There are years of journals stacked in boxes, and in the last 10 years, she began to type out her feelings on social media. There was no way for her to know the impact these writings would have on the people who read them. As time went on, she began to understand that putting the truth out there for people might be scary, but the vulnerability was worth the risk. Letting the readers know they are not alone in their anxiety, depression, and big questions about God. The journey through a fear-based faith, systematic theology, purity culture, Christian celebrity culture, and just an all-encompassing traumatic experience has led her into the depths of Reformed evangelicalism and right back out of it, into a brighter, lighter freedom in Jesus. She has found her voice again, and by telling her story of going from a fear-based religion to being loved and accepted by a God who loves more than we could ever comprehend. Karen is currently a writer for Pathos and has her first book coming out this spring, Too Much and Not Enough, Sacred Words Said Out Loud. That is a wonderful title. Welcome to the podcast, Karen. We're so grateful you are here and that you are our very first podcast of 2023. What a way to start it.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm excited, nervous and excited.
Good.
Sacred, mentioned sacred words, sacred stories. We have come to appreciate people's stories as sacred. And our job on the podcast is just to listen and then also believe. And I did hear the beep there.
I don't know what to do about it.
It's okay.
I think it's on our side, and who knows?
It doesn't matter.
My old computer might be blowing up.
I don't
It's
know.
all good.
But these sacred stories have really become something. People talk about community, and they can't believe that we can find community on social media. But we mentioned we've been speaking to women for 3 months, 2 a week. And when you listen to someone's story for 45 minutes or an hour, you can't help but experience that as intimacy. It's a deep kind of thing that we experience together. So we're excited to hear your story today in whatever level or length that you want to tell it, and then we'll dig into that a little bit, and hopefully we don't make you too uncomfortable and let you just feel open to share your story. So tell us a little bit about Karen.
Awesome. I said in the bio, I'm a 53-year-old grandma, mother of 4, and homeschooled my kids for 20 years. So we'll get back to that. I'm going to start from the very beginning, if that's okay.
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay. So I grew up with my parents. My parents were older, and they loved Jesus a lot. They were Methodist. They had a very simple faith. Every Sunday going to church, and I love Jesus too. I asked him into my heart when I was 5 years old, and I can really say I talked to him all the time and felt like I had a relationship with God. Very spiritual. When I was 9, my older brothers and sisters, they had been saved through like a Bill Glass crusade. And so they were, on fire for Jesus and Youth for Christ and Navigators, all these big, Christian. And we went on New Year's Eve, when I was in the 4th grade, 9 years old, we went to a bowling alley, went bowling, and then with Youth for Christ, and then went to see a movie. And The movie was A Thief in the Night. Yeah, it was basically a horror flick. And that my little ears and little eyes should have never heard or seen. My parents, though, were with me. They didn't know what they were about to encounter. I remember sitting in the dark gym, and I was in the back on my dad's lap watching it, and had never heard of anything. I had no idea what was going on. But basically, the premise of the movie is the girl in the movie wakes up to her alarm clock, and her husband is gone. And the world has gone crazy, gone mad with Christians disappearing. And then the rest of the movie is her and her relatives and friends trying to run from the government because they know now that, they want to be Christians. And so they don't want to get the mark of the beast. At the end, they get caught. They end up in a church, in this little steeple, this little church. They get called out in little groups, and they have to denounce God or get their heads chopped off.
Oh my gosh. I'm sorry, I know nothing about this movie.
Oh yeah.
I can't imagine as a 9-year-old how traumatic that would be.
It would. I can't even tell you. We
oh gosh.
Yeah, so at the very, very end, they're playing the song I can't even think of it right now. It's one of those Christian songs that
something like I wish we'd all been ready.
I wish we'd all been ready. That's it. They're playing that song, and the girl goes up to the guillotine. By the way, it's not a well-made movie. They used when I just went back and watched it about a year ago, they use a laundry basket to catch the heads. So there's a laundry basket with the blood dripping down it, and the girl goes up, and there's all these verses that are being said to this Christian music, and deny me and you'll go to hell, like whatever whatever. And she goes up there and puts her head on the guillotine, and then you hear and then the sister is standing down there watching it happen, and she screams, and that's how the movie ends. And I was horrified, and I had no idea what was going on. And my parents didn't know that much about it to even explain it to me, but I remember from that night on, my life was changed. It scared the absolute hell out of me. Right. And which was it was meant to do that. That's what those movies were meant to do. But I remember that night, and for probably a few months after, I would lay in bed in the middle of my parents, holding both my mom's hand and my dad's hand, just praying that God wouldn't take them, in the middle of the night without me. Like, I was so scared. And of course, saying the prayer. And then also I became the best little evangelist, because I just went around school and everywhere else telling kids that they need to ask Jesus into their heart or get their heads chopped off. So, I was a great little evangelist. My older family members, who were, like I said, very involved in all kinds of religious stuff, they would be talking about, the mark of the beast is coming, and the beast is over in Europe, and it's a big computer in Europe, and the name of it is the beast. And on the sides of the cereal boxes, those codes have 666 in them. And so I just knew it was going to happen any minute. And my whole life revolved around that. Oh Lord, please don't come back before my brother and sister-in-law get married, because I want to be in that wedding. And, then as I got older, it was like, please, I just want to get married and have babies, and don't come back, Yeah. So it was very my mom and dad loved Jesus. He's sweet. And then this monster God that I didn't know how to tell the difference between the two, really. Mm-hmm. In high school and in junior high, I was boy crazy. I loved Jesus, but I loved boys a lot. And would go to these Youth for Christ things and learn about how you weren't supposed to be with someone. You weren't supposed to be unequally yoked. You weren't supposed to do things sexually. Back in those days, it was the biological hand grenade ladder is what they called it. And it was you go from holding hands to petting to heavy petting to necking, like it was all these words, and then once you go up, you climb up the ladder, you can't go back down, and then you're eventually going to have sex before you're married. And that's so I would go to these camps and then I'd come home. I was dating like the quarterback in high school, and I'd come back and he was a nice Methodist kid. I can't believe I'm saying this. But I'd come home and I'd break up with him because he wasn't that. Whatever I was getting at camp, he wasn't that. And he was so confused too. And then a couple weeks later, I'd get back together with him because I'd come down off of the mountain high of camp and get back together with him, and become unequally yoked, I guess, again. And then after high school, after our freshman year of college, I lived at home and went to school from home. My husband now, who we were friends from the 6th grade on, we basically in high school, we were friends with benefits off and on. Like he was a good kisser and I liked kissing him. So again, I love Jesus.
Yeah.
I was confused. I was so confused. I wasn't, when I say too much and not enough, I was I'd go to these campus life things and I wasn't Christian enough. And then I didn't feel like it. And then I'd go to school and I was too Christian, so I never knew quite where I fit in. But Kevin Schock was a very good kisser. I did know that.
Yeah.
And can I say that on this podcast?
Sure. You can say.
Okay. Well, anyway, this summer after our freshman year, he asked me if I wanted to hook up for the summer, and I said, of course. And again, there was no God in any of this relationship, none, just fun. And by the end of the summer, I found out I was pregnant. Kevin and I had broken up, and I was going my way. He was going his way with college. And then I found out I was pregnant, and as a Christian, I wasn't going to have an abortion. That wasn't an option for me. So I went out. I remember going out to his house and showing him the positive pregnancy test, and he's like, "Well, what are you going to do about this?" I'm like, "I'm going to have a baby." And he's like, "No, you really you're not going to do that to me. You're not going to." He was going to be a hotshot accountant and big time and make money, and I was ruining his life. And so for the next several months, we fought a lot. And at Christmas time, he said, "Okay, we're not going to talk anymore. It's over. I hope everything comes out okay. We're done." And so for the next 4 months, we didn't speak at all until the day Alyssa was born, our daughter. Such a miracle. It's such a miracle. And he had a friend call him at college and say, "Hey, Kevin, you had a daughter." And he's like, "Okay." And they're like, the friend said, "Are you going to go see her?" And he's like, "No." And they said, "It's your daughter. Go see her." And so he came home and came into the hospital and held her. She looked just like him. He is Mexican, and she was beautiful and looked just like him. And he held her in his arms, and tears started streaming down his face. And he would say at that point, he knew his life changed at that point. Of course, he went out with his friends that night and got drunk to celebrate. But and so for the next year and a half or so, we played mom and dad when he would come home from college, and then he'd go back to college and be a college kid and have his fun. And I was at home going to college, and my mom and dad were so accepting and so loving through the whole thing. It was incredible. Now, I didn't know it then.
Right.
But now as I look back, man, they were Jesus. Yeah. So about a year and a half, Alyssa was probably a year and a half. And I found out more things about Kevin that I had no idea were going on at school. And we would give our testimony a ton after this. After we got married, everybody wanted to hear our story. And so when we would tell our story, I would say, God did this. But in reality, I'm going to be honest, it was Oprah. So it was a 4:00 in the afternoon. I was never going to say that when I gave my testimony back. But it was 4:00 in the afternoon, and I was watching Oprah, and she was like, you know what? If it's like, you need to break up with him. I felt like that's what she said to me, maybe it was God speaking through Oprah. I don't know, but I called him and I said, it's over. We're done. He would say things like, you're not going to get anybody like, you have a daughter, we have a daughter together. And so that became a thing for me where I would pray like, okay, Lord. And I did feel like God was showing me that even if I never had another husband, like he would be sufficient. God would be sufficient for me. And so I broke up with him. I actually dated a couple guys and realized that wasn't true. And on Christmas night, I took Alyssa out to his house for his parents to give presents. And he went back into his bedroom and he came out and he's like, hey, I have a present for you, a Christmas present. And I was like, what? And he said, I just went in and got on my knees in my bedroom and asked God into my life. I asked him to change my life. He's like, I want a new start. And from that point on, he was a different person. My brothers were pastors. They gave him a Bible and he went home, or he went back to college and just started reading it. And I would call to his college friends and they would say, what'd you do with Kevin? And I'd be like, I didn't do anything. God did. Like, I don't understand it, but God did. And after we graduated, got married, my brother married us, went through the whole, like, you're not going to have sex, like, don't have sex until you're married now. And we tried to not, but whatever.
He's a good kisser. He's a good kisser.
He's a good kisser and other things. So
and other things.
Yeah. And got married, got pregnant right away. And had our son. When we had our son, I ended up having an emergency C-section. And it was during that emergency C-section, the following years when I had my first panic attack, like a year almost to the date of that C-section. And it just didn't go well, the whole C-section thing. And so I didn't know what anxiety was back in 1993. People didn't talk about it.
Right.
But I had anxiety. And I actually went to the doctor and I'd be like, I'm having a heart attack. And he's like, it's not your heart. We've done all the tests. You're 24 years old. It's not your heart. And then I thought, okay, well, then I must have cancer. I'm dying of something. So I became a hypochondriac, like full-fledged. And I still have those tendencies today. I still can, flavor of the month, depending on what it is, my OCD can go there. That's just important for later on in the story. So am I talking too long?
No.
You're fine.
No.
Okay. Okay. So Kevin and I, then we started going to like a Baptist church in our town. And that's when I started to homeschool. It wasn't like a big thing that was prayed about. It just kind of wasn't, kind of almost an accident. And it was like, well, we'll just do it for her kindergarten. And then we ended up doing it for 20 years. Mostly because I was not a hater of the public school system. My mother-in-law was in it. And I knew if my daughter went, she could be, with my mother-in-law. It wasn't that I was a majorette instructor for the high school. It was more just like, we wanted to spend time with her kids. I liked the flexibility of homeschooling. But again, it was weird because when I would go to homeschooling things and I always felt like a misfit there. Cause I didn't want to wear a skirt and I let my kids watch Disney and, all those and I wasn't scared of the government. But I would also, when I would be around public school people, they'd be like, what are you doing homeschooling? So I always have felt very much like a misfit. And let's see, what do I want to talk about next? We got very involved that's when just worship music was starting to come out. And I would watch Joyce Meyer on TV and she told me to raise my hand, and I was like, I don't know if I can do that. Raise my hand when I'm singing. So she said, start in the shower. So I'd raise my hand in the shower and I got used to it. And then we needed to go to a church that we could do that in. So we went to a Church of God next and had friends there. And went to a big conference in Denver with high school kids. We were high school. We helped with the youth group. And also at this time, we did True Love Weights. So I was homeschooling and I taught True Love Weights. We'd have 30 some girls over for an overnighter. And I would teach them about purity because the biological hand grenade ladder didn't work for me. So for my children, it's best if you just stay pure. Like if you don't even do anything, don't even start up the ladder, let's just not even hold hands and let's not even date. Let's kiss dating goodbye.
Right. Don't share us and
And then it became every man's battle. Like that's not even, guys aren't going to look at girls. And, we read those books. We taught it. We taught it everywhere we went, gave out purity rings. I was very big into that. And it was, now that I look back, I see like it was so fear-based. It was so again, scare the hell out of them, scare the sex out of them. So, so fast forward, then we ended up in Fort Wayne because we found a church that was very Willow Creek style, Bill Hybels, and wanted to do small groups and all that kind of stuff. So we ended up, and this was I would say it was a good time in our life. Like between 2004 and 2006, we were in a small group in Fort Wayne in a church that was not heavy on doctrine, and we were watching Rob Bell Numa videos and excited about any podcasts were just starting to come out and, watching sermons. We went to Passion 2005, which is a college conference down in Atlanta. It was in Nashville that year. And just, oh man, we love Jesus and wanted to tell others. And we started to learn about the 1040 window and missions. And you need to tell everybody, you need to go to the nations. It's all about God. It's not about you. It's not your story. It's his story. And we just were excited. We were excited about God. In Passion, we went back to Passion 06, took a huge group of kids with us. And have you heard of Francis Chan?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So Francis Chan was our leaders breakout person. So he taught the leaders. There was probably 1,000 leaders at this conference, but he was our breakout leader. And he was, amazing, like just all about get down on your face. Like he had us all down on our faces, crying out to God, we're not worthy. You're amazing, God. And one of the speakers was John Piper. How about him? Do we know him?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
We were introduced to John Piper. And that's where it started, because in 2006, at that conference, John Piper said, if you listen to these people, then you are a sitting duck for false doctrine. And he was talking about the emergent church. He was talking about Rob Bell. He was talking about all the people we listen to.
Wow.
And I was like, oh gosh, I don't want to be a sitting duck. Oh my goodness. Okay. And so John Piper became who we listened to. And Francis Chan became who we listened to because he loved John Piper.
Yeah.
And so we started reading those books, started to become very reformed in theology, very much learning about who God chooses and who he doesn't, and all the stuff. And our church, we're now thinking, okay, our church isn't reformed enough. It's not doctrinally sound. So we decided we were going to move to Columbus, Ohio, because Francis Chan had a church plant there. His worship pastor from Simi Valley, California, had planted a church in Columbus. And we had family in Columbus. My niece and her husband were there. And so we all moved there and started a college ministry for this church down at Ohio State. And again, living the dream. Small church plant, but it was amazing. Became friends with the leaders of Passion. And we thought we were something. And we were friends now, kind of, with Francis. He'd come to our church. And I mean, this was amazing. We were going to, and also we sold everything and moved in with my nephew and his wife, had 4 small children, started doing homeless ministry, had a homeless man move in with us, had all these college students. It was amazing. But, and it's a big but, again, small church plant and no elders at the time, a pastor who was our friend. He was, we love him. We still, but there was a situation with the finances, and our nephew was writing the checks for the finances. Like, he wasn't in charge of them, but he was seeing them. And he was concerned about the finances, like what is going on here. And he had talked to the pastor a couple times about it and didn't feel like he was getting anywhere with it. So he came to my husband, who was an accountant, and said, what do I do about this? And showed him. And my husband was like, okay, this isn't good. There needs to be some kind of accountability. You know, we're all given all of our money,
right?
You know, because that's what you do. And we're seeing that this money isn't going toward the right things. And there's no one to be accountable to. And so there were 2 older men that they were trying to be elders. They were elders in training. And so my husband said to my nephew, Billy, go ahead and call one of them and, you know, tell him what's going on. Say, we want to have a meeting with him. So he did. And that guy said, nope, I'm not going to have a meeting without the pastor there. And so Billy said, okay, that's fine. We can have the pastor there. I just, like, everything was, we were trying to do it like in the best way we knew how, you know? And so they got into that meeting, and the pastor just, it was gaslighting before gaslighting. It was, you went behind my back. How dare you go to this guy and talk about me? How dare you, you know, you're talking to Kevin about it, you know, to my nephew. And how dare you then, Kevin? Like, it was bad. It was really bad. And within probably a few weeks from there, things got out of control. And Kevin, my husband, got called in. Again, we were the leaders of the college ministry, and got called in by the pastor, and the pastor said, I just feel like you don't trust me. And Kevin said, you know what? It's not you that I don't trust. It's the system that I don't trust. And he looked right at my husband and he said, Kevin, I am the system.
I believe it. Oh my gosh. That is so telling. That is so telling.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and then he said, he used Titus 3:10, which we didn't even know what that was at the time. We do now. Titus is not my favorite book of the Bible. He's Titus 3:10, which is warn a divisive brother once and then warn him twice. And after that, have nothing more to do with him, because he's like condemned to hell or something like that. And he said, you've had your 2 warnings, one more and you're out. Like, and we want you to sit down for a time of restoration. We, meaning him. There was nobody else. It was just him calling the shots.
Right.
And Kevin's like, who's going to run the college ministry? And he said, I'll do it. And we're like, okay. Kevin came home, and we had been talking to people outside of the church about what all was going on. And they're like, get out now. Like, you need to leave the church. And so within 2 days we had left the church, and my nephew and his wife, you know, there were probably 4 of us couples who knew what was going on, who left the church. And every other couple in the church, though, was told, not to talk to us. The pastor went from small group to small group to small group to say, don't ask, don't talk to them. That would be slander. So nobody ever knew our side. Nobody ever knew what happened at all. Like, they had no idea what happened. They just knew the shocks were gone, and these other couples. Yeah. Nobody knew. And we thought at the time, somebody's going to come to the rescue here. Who's going to, like, are the elders from Simi Valley going to come in and try to get us to make up? Like, how can we make amends? We did not want it to be over. We had moved to Columbus for this. And my father-in-law, who had also moved with us, it's all so crazy, but my father-in-law, who was just, again, a simple faith, loved Jesus, he wrote Francis because he loved Francis. He would listen to him all the time. So he wrote him an email straight, to the head dog and said, what's going on? My son's a great guy. These guys are great guys. Like, they love God. And why is this happening? And Francis wrote him back, and it was 2 days before Christmas. And I actually still have the email. And I've thought about, mind you, I have thought through the years, this was in 2007, so 15 years, I've thought about emailing Francis back just to say, hey, do you have anything to say? Can I show you the email that you sent my father-in-law? Because it was scathing. It was awful. It was as bad as you could think it would be, as far as just like, you think your son's great, your son's not great. I called this other elder in training and I talked to him, and he, and I trust the pastor. He's my friend and I trust him. And so you're going to leave this church, you're going to leave other churches. And until, you're in sin, and until you ask for forgiveness, don't talk to me again. And that's how he ended it. Like, it was nothing of ever what we could have thought that he would ever say. Like, it was unbelievable. So
I think I listened to Francis. That was about the time I was listening to Francis, and I really liked, his idea of creating these smaller churches and these, home kind of based things. And I really, like a lot of people, fell in love with him.
Yep.
But he definitely had some really, strong. And anytime you're going to do something like that without a lot of organization, you have to have strong personal alliances, whether they're right or not. Right? And so that's the danger in any kind of hierarchy, is that it's prone to abuse.
Yeah.
Just like what you experience. And that's not church hurt, that's church harm.
Yeah.
So anyway, I want you to finish your story. It's good.
Yeah. No, that's good. So for a few months there, we were floundering. We told our college students, they were home on Christmas break. So we emailed them all and just sent out a mass email and said, we're done. Like, we don't know what to tell you, but because we didn't want to tell them the story of what had happened necessarily. They were all shocked. Nobody could understand what was going on. And we said in the email, we think the pastor will probably keep the college ministry going. And they all said, well, that's not why we come. We're coming for you guys. Like, we're following you. And we said, don't follow us. We don't even know where we're going. Like, we were the lowest of the low, like at that point, just crying all the time. Like, please don't follow us. But they ended up following up. They ended up saying, no, please, can we still keep meeting on Tuesday nights, for small group? And so we did. And they actually were precious, those college students, and walked us through a really hard time, which was really cool. But then we decided we need to go to another church, and this church needs to have elders, gray-haired elders. And it still needed to be reformed, even though I had done systematic theology. We had gone through that at this church we had just been at. And as we were going through it, and it's talking about, that babies would go to hell, that God would choose babies to go to hell. My brain couldn't comprehend it. And I remember at that point, I would say that was where my deconstruction started. Very quietly, but it started because I was like, no. How is this God?
Right.
And I would lay in bed at night and think those things, but I couldn't say it out loud. But we went to this next church, and this next church was far worse. 9 months after that whole church thing happened, we did have some reconciliation with that pastor, because a kid came home who was on the mission field. A guy came home and saw their church was floundering. And so he asked the pastor if he could reach out to Kevin, and Kevin was like, they met at Panera, and Kevin was like, this is the first time anyone's listened to our side.
Mm.
The very first time, but by that time we were already very involved in this other church. So we didn't go back. But then we got an amazing apology from that pastor. So again, it wasn't about our friendship. It was about the system with that one.
Mm-hmm.
This one, however, the second one was about the system, but also about, I just could not with the pastor. I couldn't. He was so controlling and so, oh, you want to do this? Well, you can't do that. You can't do that kind of ministry, because that kind of ministry isn't, like, he would tell us what we could and couldn't do.
Mm.
To the point where I had so much anxiety and depression on Saturday nights before church on Sunday, I was having panic attacks.
Mm.
And Kevin was trying to, pray over me. And I remember one Sunday I went in and I was standing with my friends, and they knew how much anxiety I had, and my daughters, who were older at the time. And the pastor's wife came up and said, this was after church. And she said, okay, ladies, disperse. You need to go talk to the new people. We got to keep this going. And I was just like, oh, so that's what this is. This is building a kingdom. Your kingdom. This isn't about us. This wasn't. And my husband was like, oh, I went to the doctor, and we had a not great family doctor at the time who said, you need counseling, you need therapy. And I'm going to give you the name of an older man who's a Christian therapist. I'm going to give you this name. So I made the appointment with him. He was from a different church. Took 2 months to get into him, probably. And in that time period, the day before my counseling appointment, I was talking to our pastor on the phone. And I told him that I had a counseling appointment the next day, thinking he'd be proud of me, going to see a counselor. His wife was a therapist. And he was like, oh, no, you can't go outside of the church for this. Like, you need to stay in the church. We're a family, and there are people inside the church, his wife included, that could counsel you. What are you doing? And I was like, I went home that day after I got off the phone with him to Kevin, and I was like, he said, we can't do this. He said, we need to cancel this appointment. And Kevin was like, oh, no, we're not canceling this appointment, because the church was the reason why I was going to therapy, right? Like, I'm not going to stay inside the church to get my therapy.
Right.
I want gaslit again.
Right.
So I went to my appointment the next day and sat across and told our story and my story. And after a couple months, we left the church. Exactly what our pastor was afraid was going to happen if we went outside happened. Mm-hmm. He knew what was going to happen. He knew.
Right.
And it did. The older man was like, why don't you want to leave? Like, this isn't this isn't your church. Like, why? And I was like, we can't leave. Francis said we would be church hoppers. Like, I just felt like I don't want to be a church hopper. Yeah. And he was like, no. You get to hop on over to another place. And so we did. And that was hard. That was really hard. And we left our daughter and her now husband at the time. But Kevin, it was what was best for me and my husband.
Right.
So it's like, but guess what we did? We went to another Reformed church, downtown Columbus this time. And a cool one, Acts 29. The pastor was friends with Mark Driscoll. It was in Mark Driscoll's heyday.
Oh boy.
Restless.
Yep.
Restless Reformed, right?
Yes, young, restless, and reformed. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I did not fit. Talk about a misfit. My husband's cool, and one Sunday morning, we did the greeting, me and my husband. We're the oldest people in the church. It's a college church. It's very dark. It's in a warehouse, so there's no light, there's no windows, whatever. And I wore a yellow sweater that day, and everybody that walked in, every college kid, I'd be like, good morning. And they wouldn't, like, they weren't having it. And my husband would be like, what's up? And they go, uh-huh. Mm-hmm. they like shake their head at him. And so like after that, I decided like I'm never going to wear yellow again to this church. And I didn't. I wore black after that. Like I knew my place, you know.
Gosh.
But it became again as because of the Reformed theology of it. It was very much worm theology. I didn't know that that's what it was at the time, but it was very much you're a loser, or you know, you're not worthy. Right. You're nothing. Every song was in a minor key and about, you know, the blood of the blood sacrificed for the worm. And I couldn't take it. Loved the people again, and we're still friends with those people, but we slid out the back door of that one, you know, like, and in 2011 is when I watched a video on Rob Bell, his video for Love Wins. I watched that video and he was like, do you really think Gandhi is in hell? Like, do you think that? And I remember watching that video and I turned around after I watched it and I walked over to my husband and I said, everything he said in that video, that's all. I have those questions. You know, and I remember my daughter looking at me and saying, Mom, you're scaring me. And I'm like, I'm not telling you Rob is leading me that way. I'm telling you, I have those questions. You know, it's not the emergent church that's leading me astray. I have those questions. I lay in bed at night and think, is there even a God? If this is what, you know, we had a little 2-year-old, I think 2 or 3-year-old in our church at that time, at that church, who got hit by a car and died. Kevin and I were out at the time in Arizona, or I was out in Arizona with my parents, visiting my sister, and found out that this little boy had died, and I had him in the nursery. He's the cutest little kid. And I mean, I was the whole church obviously devastation, right? And so I remember at the time just crying, just bawling and saying to an elder of another church, saying, at least, you know, we can know he's like in the presence of Jesus, you know. And that elder said, you can't know that. We don't know if he's chosen or not. Like you can, you know, we can think that probably because of his lineage that he is, but we don't know that.
Oh my God.
And so that, I mean, several things like that made me question whether what God are we serving here? Like what God, what are we doing? Right. Like, what is this?
Right.
And so I just started, Kevin too, like we just started listening to Rob and found other people that we liked, and ended up moving back to Fort Wayne. One thing before that, am I talking too long?
No.
You're doing good.
Okay.
I'm like totally relating to so much of what you're saying. So please continue.
Okay. We were going to head down to Atlanta to be part of a church down there that had to do with the Passion conferences. And like, we thought, okay, this is where we would be home. It wasn't not a Reformed church, more like just a big mega church, but we were going to be leaders there. Like, we were friends with the pastor and his wife, and we were excited to go down there. And one of our college students went down before us because she was free to go. We needed to find jobs. This small group of people that were going to move together down to Atlanta. And she got down there and she was living with some of the leaders that were like college leaders and college age leaders in this. And she would call home and she would be crying. She called me up and she's just bawling. And she's like, it's not what you think it is down here. She's like, they taught you to serve the homeless and to do all these things. I thought that's what we'd be doing, but it's a who's who can get invited to what baby shower or what, wedding shower, or like, she's like, it's not even about what you guys were about. She's like, this is not what you think it is.
Mm-hmm.
And we are thankful to this day that she went down there before us. She came home and we never ended up moving down there.
Mm-hmm.
Because I realized too, I think I knew it, because when we'd go to things where we would have lunch with them, or we'd go down to Atlanta, and I always cared so much about what I wore. I always wanted to, make sure I looked good and wore the right clothes and name brands, like here we are talking about the nations, and I care more about what I look like when I'm with these people, and it just didn't sit right. Nothing sat right. So we ended up coming back to small, humble Fort Wayne, Indiana, and at a church where pretty progressive church, and was good. But eventually we ended up just not going. So, yes. Yeah, one thing I forgot to mention was that during these times in these churches, especially in the one church and specifically, I remember like when I was having the anxiety, they would say it's a demon, like,
Yeah.
Mark Driscoll and all that kind of stuff, like it's demonic. And so I can remember, I don't know how many times, having people that I didn't even know, like praying over me, missionaries from China that would come in and they'd be like, we'll pray for you. And they would I would be on my knees and they'd be around me trying to pray the demon out of me, naming the demon fear and praying it out of me. And that anxiety didn't leave. So of course it's a demon. So now I'm not only completely unworthy, but I'm also possessed with a demon of fear. So,
and I don't mean to interject here, but I'm like, that's hilarious to me that they named the demon fear, because I'm like, where did it come from? It came from the church.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Oh,
yep.
I can't.
Right on in there, jumped right on in me at that stupid movie. And when I was 9 years old,
when you watched the movie,
Gosh.
yeah.
Jumped out of the projector and right on into me.
Oh my gosh.
So Karen, obviously you're at a different place in your life. I was going to ask you about your longings. I may come back to that, because we know you long to kiss and be unequally yoked with a Methodist.
Good for you.
But I want to know about your other longings. But I'm also curious as, how did this work into where, you're on a different path now? How did you finally get there? You said you started asking questions, and those were your questions. They weren't planted by someone else. They're from somewhere deep inside you. How did that kind of play out in the years to follow?
Yeah, I became dangerous. I would say that was the word. I became dangerous, even at this more progressive church, which again, friends with everyone there. I mean, still to this day, we're friends with all of these people. But when I started to question whether hell existed, and I remember in 2014, my word for the year was all. I don't know. I didn't know where it came from, whatever. Mm-hmm. And I started to do a deep dive into the word all and look at scripture. And I was like, wait a minute, all, does all mean all? Like if Jesus died for all, does all mean all, or only the chosen? Or, mm-hmm. if in Adam all had sinned and Christ all, and so I became dangerous. And then just questioning hell, learning about hell. I remember a sweet lady in one of our Bible studies. And I love her. But she looked at me and she said, it's fine if you have these questions with us, but, don't scare the children. Don't say this in front of the college students or the high school students. And I'm like, okay. So I lost my voice. I remember there were so many years too, where we were in churches that were very much complimentary and women can't do anything. I maybe led a women's retreat once. But I would say to my husband, how is this fair that if you want to be a pastor, you can go to college for it and then come back, and then you are absolutely anointed. Like, you go to college, you make that decision, but then God has anointed you. But I don't get to make that decision. I don't get to be a pastor. I don't get to teach. I have this love of learning, and yet I don't get to teach. And so, I became pretty dangerous. That was in 2014, 2015. And then the whole political scene, I had been a good little Republican, Rush Limbaugh listening. My mom and dad moved in with us in 2010, and my dad had dementia. He died in 2012. And then my mom just died a couple years ago, but had lived with us for 10 years. And again, their simple faith is what had led me straight out of Reformed, whatever. I remember we would be with my family, with my older brothers and sisters, we'd all be in a room and we'd be fighting over the 5 points of Calvinism or whatever in my mom's living room. And she would be cooking, and then she'd come out and she'd hear us fighting, and she never liked any of us to fight. Right. And she would go, "I'm so glad I don't know anything of what you guys are talking about. All I know is Jesus loves me. This I know, for the Bible. That's all I have to know." And then she'd go back in and quietly serve us, and I would roll my eyes thinking, "Are you even saved, Mom?" And I thought about that about my mom and dad. In the book, I do write about that. Like, my mom and dad's faith was so strong, but because they didn't have quiet times with us, and they didn't teach us about the nations and going, I didn't know if they were even going to go to heaven. Like, I know now.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing how we muck everything up when it is just that simple? We have mucked it up so bad, and how precious to think about your mom and dad's faith, that it can just be that simple. I don't know. That just really struck me, and how we have just so muddied the waters with all this, crap, really. Stuff that we think we have to do, when it's just as simple as Jesus loves me, this I know, and I can rest in that. And we have just made it so toxic and just so muddied. It's crazy. But you telling your story, and just that, especially that part of it, just makes me think, wow, what have we made this into? Right.
We often talk about our spirituality now, and people, worry if we've, slid down a slippery slope or become unequally yoked with a Methodist. I'm never going to forget that.
That's so funny.
And so, and I try to tell them, basically our spirituality now is very, very simple, just like you're talking about with your mom. Yeah. It's deeper. But it's very simple. It's not mucked up. And the word you used a lot while you were telling us your story is the system. There was always a system. And I try to explain that to people, they say, well, my church is, I'm sorry you experienced that, but my church is not as bad as the Baptist church, or we're better than that. I said, but it's a systemic problem. It's like systemic racism. It's broken. And what ways do you see that what are the most serious parts of that system that's toxic, that doesn't work, that causes you to have anxiety and things like that?
Honestly, I think it's when you get into a position of leadership, it's really easy, I think. And what I've seen, and what I know of my own heart too, like, to make it about your kingdom, and to make it about, you want it to grow. You want this thing to grow. And so you put the money there, you put the time there, you put all the energy goes into a Sunday morning, or And then the money that is coming in, if it, the people with the money kind of have the most say in the church body. It just gets real messed up. I don't know how you can distinguish it. I don't know how. And then the doctrine and the Kevin and I, it took me a long time to not go to church, to realize that there was life outside. And we'll go, our kids, train up a child in the way they should go. When they're old, they don't want to depart from it, So our kids are still loving Jesus, and that's great. But they'll look at us and be like, why don't you want to go to church? And it's like, we're really okay. We're really okay. On Sunday mornings, it just became a thing. We spent a lot of our time, when I talk about too much and not enough, we spent so much time, me trying to be this submissive wife and him be the leader. And he just wasn't made. We're just made so differently. And I would be like, are you going to get up and go to the men's Bible study? Are you going to read your Bible? Are you going to do this? And then the one pastor that was pretty toxic would say to our guys, the women have issues because you're not leading them, and they have anxiety because you're not leading them. So then I would go back to my husband, and I'd be like, well, you need to lead me. Yeah. So there I am leading him to lead me. Right? Yeah. And so when we finally decided, you know what, this is all crap, and we're going to be a team. It's a beautiful thing now. Our marriage is so much better than it ever was when we were in the church. It was good when we were in the church. We were best friends, and I'm thankful, so thankful that we've done this deconstruction, reconstruction, whatever you want to say, together. Being out of it it's such a beautiful thing and it took me a long time to be able to sit at home on a Sunday morning and not feel totally guilty. And it was and my husband wasn't like that. He was like, he was fine. But it was like one day I just realized, well, who do I feel guilty in front of? Is it God or is it the people? And then I realized, no, it's the people. That's who I'm afraid of.
Right.
Yeah. So your book is called Too Much and Not Enough. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
So you've touched on that throughout your story, but just kind of give people the finer points. When's it coming out? Maybe flesh that out just a little more. I know you're excited about this. I know it's what writing a book's like. It's almost like giving birth.
Exactly. And I'm way overdue, I think.
Yeah. Tell us.
Induce me, someone. Induce me now. Yeah.
And they also take, instead of 9 months, they take twice that long to come out. They take about 18 months is what. So anyway. Yeah. Yes. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So it was cool. I think it was probably a year and a half ago, I got involved with Keith Giles and his Square One. And the very first day of Square One, I'm in this group of people and we're telling our story. And at the very end of it, Keith just said to me, because I said, I've lost my voice. I don't have a place to talk. I don't have a place to, and Keith said, I believe there's a group of people out there that need to hear your voice. You just don't know it yet. And so then in Square One, on our little community group, I started writing. My writing, and even in the book, it's kind of like poetry. It's just line. There's no I was going to say there's no rhyme or reason, but it's crazy. So, but I would write, just putting my heart out there. And then Keith was like, you know what, you need a blog on Pathos. So he got me on that. And then for years, as I've written about my anxiety and depression and being a mom and raising kids and all that kind of stuff, people have told me you should write a book. or even these posts that you've written on Facebook could be put together to be a book. So that's what we did. I took posts from over the years of our story and put them together. At first I had, I don't know how many, I probably had 300 posts, and I handed them to Keith, and he's like, yeah, we need to,
trim this down a little
books, maybe 2 books out of this. So I actually, what's cool is I took out all of the ones about my mom and dad. I left one in there about my mom and dad. I have written letters to them every year on the anniversary of their death, and posted them, and people have been moved by me just talking to them about their faith and about how they were Jesus to me, so I took all of them out, and I think that's going to be my next book, will be about my mom and dad and their faith. So I'm excited about that. If right now it's looking, I think the last time I talked to Keith, he said April will be my coming out party. So
all right,
that's
so
awesome.
Good. If we get done with the novel, maybe the novel will come out about the same time, and we can work together with you to help promote.
Absolutely.
I would love that. I would love that.
That would be fun.
I love your guys' book. It's so good.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. This has been, the time's flown by while you're telling your story. You felt like you're talking too much, but it's those are the kind of stories we need. And
so many people, I mean, I'm going to speak selfishly for myself, but I do believe, like what Keith said, there are people out there that need to hear what you have to say. And even in this podcast, for me, it's validating. And even, when we were, paused on the recording, I was able to talk to you a little bit more about anxiety. And that's a really tough, I think as much as we've made progress in that area, it's still really hard to talk about, because there's so much shame built around anxiety. I mean, I know we're doing so much better, within that area, but I still feel like there's still a lot of shame surrounding it. So I think this is going to be a great podcast for people to just, inhale and exhale and just say, I'm not alone,
Right.
Yeah.
And I would add around the topic of anxiety that anxiety is not a demon.
Oh, right.
It may be an angel, because it's trying to tell you something. It's trying.
Right. It's communicating.
It's communicating with you. And the more you can go inside, you said all of this change is coming from me. It's coming from inside. And that's what the anxiety is trying to do is communicate with you. And anyway, that's a whole nother discussion. But we're so happy you joined us today on this. Is this Saturday?
It is Saturday.
I lost track over the holidays, what day it was.
Yeah, right.
And we're going to get to see our grandkids later today, and we're excited about that. But
I understand that.
Thanks for sharing your life with us. Yeah. This has been really good. I'm unsure what to call it because I'm just hung up on the unequally with the Methodist boy.
I think that should be the title.
Oh no. Oh, okay.
No, I'm going to try my best not to embarrass you, but but thank you for coming on. We'll look for the book. We'll help.
Let's help promote it.
Help
I
promote
think that's going to be a really great, valuable read.
It'll be good, and have a good Saturday. Enjoy your time watching football this weekend, right?
Yeah.
Guys, come on.
Ohio State, yeah.
We're rooting for them too.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. You all are precious.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate that.
Thank you for joining us today on the Desert Sanctuary. We hope you find who you are as you embark on your own journey.
For all of us here at the Desert Sanctuary, be who you are, be where you are, and be at peace.